In early 2013, shortly after the newly elected township board took office, the township's legal expense doubled. This graph shows the yearly legal costs for the township going back to 2007, as well as the forecasted legal costs out to 2017. Each department tracked their legal expense. As expected, the red line shows that the Board of Trustees has the highest legal expense compared to the other departments. You can see that for 5 of the 6 years prior to the current board coming into office, the board's legal expense was about $100,000 per year. In 2008 and 9, almost $250,000 was spent on legal bills. This outlier was due to the Harvest Corners development legal dispute. When the new board took office in 2012 and went to the new law firm in 2013, the yearly legal expense jumped to almost $200,000. The board is forecasting that the legal expense in the future will continue to be above the $200,000 level per year. The graph clearly indicates that the increased legal expense occurred when the current board took office. This investigation is aimed at trying to explain the reasons for the increased cost. Another way of looking at the increase in the legal expense is to look at the average monthly legal expense prior to the new board coming into office with the average monthly legal cost over the past 29 months that they have been in office. This graph shows that comparison. The current board is spending, on average, almost $18,000 per month on legal expense compared to the $9,000 per month under the previous board and law firm. This analysis was initiated to determine what is driving the higher cost. It was impossible to perform the analysis based on the information that's included in the monthly board meeting packets. Here's an example of the useless information included in most of the monthly board packets. In order to perform the analysis, it was necessary to submit a FOIA request for each billing statement. After much work and personal cost for the documents, a summary spreadsheet was generated to identify the various cost drivers. Here is a copy of the spreadsheet generated from the FOIA requests. This graph summarizes the information shown on the previous chart. The legal expenses shown are categorized from May of 2013 through September of 2015. The highest expense is due to the monthly retainer fee the board has agreed to pay the law firm. This has resulted in over $250,000 over the 29-month period. The other reasons for the legal expense are labor and employment, the mill race issue, Blossom Ridge issue, general litigation, the Edwards FOIA lawsuit, the tax tribunal, water fee litigation, the Catalpa condemnation, the Rochester cider mill lawsuit, and several others. I will go into many of these items later. Since the primary cost driver is the monthly retainer fee that is paid to our current township attorney's firm, let's take a closer look at that expense. The monthly retainer fee approach was initiated when the board switched to the new law firm in 2013. The retainer fee only covers general legal support and prosecution. It does not cover legal support for labor issues, employment issues, or any litigation. The request for proposal for legal services dated January 22, 2013 stated that the township had 0 hours for labor and litigation legal expense in fiscal years 2010 and 2011. So here is a comparison of the monthly retainer fee to the average monthly legal expense from the previous law firm. It turns out that the monthly retainer fee is slightly higher than the all-inclusive average monthly fee with the previous law firm. Since the township claimed they did not incur any labor counsel or litigation costs in 2010 and 11, the retainer fee does not seem inappropriately high. It should be pointed out that it was only after the Oakland Township Watcher website raised the issue of the high legal bills when Treasurer Langlois investigated and discovered that some legal bills have not been charged to the developer's escrow accounts but paid by taxpayers. Essentially, Oakland Township was subsidizing developers. As a result, this summer, the board reduced the monthly retainer fee from $9,000 to $8,250 per month and corrected their accounting practices. Here's a graph that shows the original monthly retainer fee of $9,000 as well as the recently reduced retainer fee, neither of which include labor, employment, or litigation costs, compared to the all-inclusive monthly expense with our previous board and law firm. There is more to the story regarding how the retainer fee was initially contracted at $9,000 per month or $108,000 per year. Supervisor Gonzer developed a spreadsheet that was used to compare the submissions from the 9 law firms that submitted proposals in response to the township's request for a proposal. Here's a copy of that spreadsheet. It clearly shows that Gianmarco and Mullins' proposal had a $90,000 per year or $7,500 per month retainer fee, not the $9,000 per month retainer fee we have been paying for over 2 years. So why the difference? Here is the discussion that occurred at the February 12, 2013 board meeting where the candidates for interview were selected.
The board will consider proposals for providing the township legal services and schedule a special meeting to interview candidates. We received 9 responses to our request for proposal. The firms that responded varied in size from 2 to 98. I was asked to provide my recommendation for 3 to 5. Gianmarco, Mullins, Horton, PC, $125 an hour with a flat fee bid also of $90,000 based on the township's past 3-year history for legal services, based on hours that we've had.
Here's the motion to have Gianmarco and Mullin be our township's law firm.
I move that Oakland Township retain the firm of Gianmarco, Mullins, and Horton, P.C. as township attorney, and with the township supervisor, it's a typo, and authorize, the township supervisor to issue a letter directing the township's current law firm to forward the files into the possession of Gianmarco, Mullins, and Horton, P.C.
Unfortunately, the signed contract did not reflect the yearly retainer fee of $90,000 that had been discussed at the February 12th meeting. The contract that Supervisor Gonzer negotiated and signed had a yearly retainer fee of $108,000. At the October 22, 2013 board meeting, former trustee Judy Keys pointed out the discrepancy between what had been publicly stated as the retainer fee and what ended up in the contract.
I have a note here from Supervisor Gonzer, an email dated December 30th, where he states, I'm also going to add to agenda the item pertaining to the board initiating a thorough review of legal services contract for the township. It has been suggested that we should seriously consider a fixed cost annual contract for general counsel versus the hourly rate contract under which we currently operate. At the February 26th meeting, when we were interviewing attorney firms, there was a matrix that was devised by Supervisor Gonzer and given to the board members to help them to compare the different attorney firms. And using this guide, it states here that all of these services, with the exception of litigation and labor, would be included in a flat annual rate or fee of $90,000, and that only litigation and labor would be charged at $125,000. And I relied on that, and that was something that was very instrumental in my vote approving Gianmarco Mullen, because I saw, and I made that comment. I said, looking into the future, I see all these issues that the township is facing, and I see this fee structure being all-inclusive, and that was said many times as being attractive and valuable for our residents. I never received this board. It was never presented with the contract. When the contract was finally drafted and signed on the March 1st, it states here it was March 1st, the contract wasn't signed for the $90,000 that was proposed, and the matrix that was given to us by Supervisor Gonzer actually was $108,000. But it did reinstate the fact that additional 125 hour would be related only to litigation and/or labor matters.
It was at that same meeting that Trustee Keys announced her resignation from the board. The reason for the increase from $90,000 to $108,000 was never discussed or openly shared with the citizens. So a question arises: why did Supervisor Gonzer agree to a higher cost retainer fee than what had publicly been disclosed or shared with other board members? Let's move on to the other categories. As has already been presented, $9,000 of the almost $18,000 monthly expense is due to the retainer fee. The remaining $9,000 must still be added to that amount. That money has been spent on labor, employment, and litigation items. So let's take a closer look at those cost drivers. These items appear to be the reason for the increased legal expense in our township. After the expense for the monthly retainer fees, the next largest reason for the high legal costs is labor and employment. Over 29 months, the board has spent almost $75,000 for labor and employment. Much of the $75,000 is related to the unionization that took place in our township. Since the board was elected, the fire department and some of the office staff have unionized. Many believe that the unionization efforts were due to statements, actions, and decisions the new board and supervisor made after they were elected in the primary of 2012. This is supported by the facts included in the township's request for proposal for legal services dated January 22, 2013. The township had 0 hours of legal support for labor counsel in fiscal years 2010 and 11. It was not until the summer of 2012, when the elections occurred, that the township started to incur costs for labor counsel. More recently, there were legal challenges that the board took in trying to prevent the unionization efforts of the Parks and Recreation staff. The bottom line is that much of the $75,000 expense is due to the board's actions and decisions. We did not have that expense prior to their taking office. The next highest expenditure is the Paint Creek Dam and mill race issue. Almost $42,000 has been spent on this issue. One of the campaign issues the board ran on was related to the loss of water flowing down the mill race due to the removal of a dam on Paint Creek. Several homeowners were negatively impacted since they no longer had water running through their property. This became a political issue since the previous board had agreed to have the dam removed. Since the Clinton River Watershed Council was championing the dam removal, they became the defendant in a legal fight that the board filed against them. There are probably not many citizens that know that the township has spent $42,000 on legal fees in trying to have water returned to the mill race. This does not include any engineering costs that the township has incurred. A separate analysis will be undertaken and reported on, identifying all the costs incurred by the township on this issue. Once again, these expenses are the direct results of the board's actions. The next highest expenditure area is for the fight against the Blossom Ridge development at Adams and Dutton Road. Almost $30,000 has been spent on this issue. This is not an all-inclusive cost since most of the legal expense is being covered by the township's insurance company. It is not possible to identify those costs, but they certainly will have an impact on the township's insurance premiums. This development is currently involved in a number of discrimination lawsuits. One involves the federal government and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It should be noted that our township attorney is the attorney defending the township on this matter, but most of his fees on this issue are being paid by the insurance company. This issue was also a campaign issue in 2012. The voters of Oakland Township voted in a referendum in 2013 to prevent this development from being allowed in Oakland Township. The legal issues related to this topic are still unresolved. Potential fines could be placed against Oakland Township if the township loses its battle in court. The cost associated for this item is another direct result of the board actions, but the board appears to be following through on their campaign promises and following the will of the people that voted in the 2013 referendum. The next category is called general litigation. It involves $28,000 in legal fees. The documentation provided from the FOIAs did not provide any further insight into what these litigation items are. Former trustee Mark Edwards filed a lawsuit against Oakland Township for alleged Open Meeting Act violations and failure to provide documents requested through the FOIA process. The issue had been appealed and was rejected by the courts. The total cost to the township for fighting this issue was $16,000. Once again, it is believed that the township's insurance company paid for additional legal support on this matter. There were a number of smaller litigation issues that contributed to driving the township's legal costs up. You can read those on the far right of this chart. The bottom line is that much of the labor, employment, and litigation costs incurred by the township are a result of decisions the board has made. Some of those may have the support from the majority of the citizens, others may not. Here are the conclusions from the analysis. The primary reason for the township's legal expense doubling is labor negotiations, employment issues, and litigation costs. The township board is directly responsible for many of the labor, employment, and litigation cost drivers. Questions exist over Ganzer's authority and justification for increasing the retainer fee without disclosure to fellow board members or citizens. The township published records make it impossible to understand the reasons for litigation costs without using the FOIA process. Here are some recommendations. The supervisor and the board need to improve their leadership behavior to eliminate what some considered a hostile environment that warranted efforts to form unions. The board needs to understand the legal and associated costs before making litigious decisions. The supervisor should explain why he increased the retainer fee from $90,000 per year to $108,000 per year without board approval or citizen knowledge. Continuing, the board and the staff need to improve the transparency of the board packet information by being more descriptive of the reasons for the litigation. And finally, the board should request that our law firm publish quarterly legal status reports, much like the City of Troy. In closing, I hope this analysis helps you understand the reasons for the increased legal expense in our township. If you are upset about the higher cost, please contact the board and ask them to take action to reduce it. Thank you.